So we are going to use this directions API to make API request to this endpoint over here, and create polylines to our Google Maps in JetpackCompose. So JetpackCompose has a new package called the Map Compose. So we're going to use this Map Compose library to create the map and also add the markers and the polylines, direction polylines. So very quick, here is the response from when you query this particular endpoint. So we are going to, so these are the endpoints. So we have here the geocoordinates waypoints, the routes, the legs here, and the steps. So here are just but the how do I call it, the maneuvers. So move right, left. So see, these are the maneuvers. So we're going to use this API to query and draw polylines on our map. So very quickly, let me demo of how the apps looks like. So for example, I'll just make it simple by if you click of any point of interest. So the origin, you have just made it, hard-coded it to be in Singapore. But if you click on any point of interest, let's say Marina Bay Sands, Singapore, you click on that, it queries the APIs, and then it draws the polyline on the map. And also if you click on anywhere, let's say Tanjong Teru, here, if you click, so the API actually is very point. So in this tutorial, you are going to explore the clean architecture way of handling data in Kotlin and JetpackCompose, of course. So I'm just going to show a walkthrough of course, all the GitHub core, all the source code for this project will be available on GitHub. So let's start with the project structure. So I decided to break this into features. So you have two features here. So I'm only going to explain this feature: Google Maps, Google Places API. So this is the feature that I'm going to play. So let's quickly look at the directory structure here. So here we have a resource. So the resource file here has just our how our response will handle our response. It's just a generic C class. So that is that. And if we move at our feature Google Maps, Google Places directory, we have data, dependency injection DI, our domain layer, and our presentation layer. So in our data here, we have remote data and the repository, and also in our domain here, we also have models, repository, and the use cases. So starting with let's start with our remote. So remotes, you have our data transfer object, the DTOs, and where we install in our Retrofit as Google Places API. So in here, we're just going to create an interface called Google Places API, and we have the parameter, the query, the origin, the destination, and of course our map key. That is coming from this, the origin here, the query parameter, and also the destination, and also the map key. So that is that, and also we have our base URL that contains the default base URL for our Google Maps API. This one over here. So next we have is the DTOs. So these data transfer objects are just for mapping our data from our domain layer to our data transfer object. So we have here the distance DTO, which will be mapped to our domain, the distance in our domain over here, distance in our domain, and also we have the duration, the same thing, Google waypoints, this one. So many of these things I've just removed, I've just extracted from this point here. So you have Google geocoded waypoints. So we have here geocoded waypoints as a data class. So then we have those of course, those those key. Alright, so we have Google Places info. So this is our main info that contains the geocoded waypoints, the routes, and the status. So we have that. Our domain only contains a mapped version of our details. Okay, so in the domain directory under repository, so here we are going to create an interface that will be implemented in our data directory over here in the repository directory. We just create an interface for get direction that will take in origin, destination, and of course the map key. And this one returns a flow of type, the generic seed class that I showed you in the first, the resource here, and of course it will wrap in the Google Places info, the base the base domain, over here. So the base domain model here, Google Places info. All right. So the next is we implement this interface in our repository here. So implement it. So in here, this is where we call the retrofit. We bind in our APIs and we bind in our API. So here we'll use the Google API class, the interface here that involves retrofit to query the data from the API. Alright, so after getting the data, we have the data in our state. So in order to query that data in our view model, we'll create a new directory in our domain directory called use case. So in this use case, that we will get to invoke our we will use the invoke operator function to query, so that the invoke function here will allow us to get to call this class, the get direction API class, as a function. Then we just pass in the repositories. Alright, so under this same directory structure, we also have a presentation. So in the presentation here is where we have our states and our view model. So in the view the state, the Google Places info state, just hold in the state of our API queries. So it will hold the data, the Google Places info. It will hold whether the data is being loaded or is loading as a boolean over here. Next we have the view model. So inside the view model, we will inject the direction API from our use case, and of course assign in a parameter for our states over here, and also create some, of course, our flows that will be consumed in the API. So when we call this function in our front end, when a map is when the point of interest will be clicked, we'll be calling this function. So this function has everything. So I created this state here to hold the polylines data. So in order to populate that, when the data is accessed, we will decode. Of course, we will decode our polylines here. This function here, the function to decode polylines here. So this function invokes this private function that decodes our polyline. So this function, I actually, it's not my function. It's a function that I got from the internet, and cheers to the owner. Cheers to the owner. This link over here. So this normally returns a length of a list of latitude and longitude of the routes from the API. So if you take a look at our API structure here, we have routes, and of course there is outbound, and there's this over here and here, the polyline points. So that function, decode polyline, will decode this one and returns a list of latitude and longitude that will allow us to plot them on our map as polylines like this. Right. Now that is done, we also have some event flows. in our app so that we can tell whether we are loading data from the API or we are just the data has been fetched from the API. So that one I created an event flow, a sealed inner class of event flow of type UI event flow. So this function will normally tell us whether we are querying data or not. So we'll when we invoke this function to get the directions passing the required parameters, this this flow will be emitting the current state of our application and we'll be getting them in our UI. So if you move to the final part is the map activity. Yeah, main activity. We just have the okay. We have our states over here and our view model imported there. We also have our UI event flow. So I've used launch effects, so the launch effect. So you can I'll make a video on side effects in JetpackCompose in a future video. We'll see how side effects work in JetpackCompose. So we create a scaffold and of course return our Google Map view. The Google Map view only takes in a modifier and on map loaded function a list of this is not included in the tutorial, but we have here the our view model imported. So when the map is loaded, we create this one is coming from the package, this package over here, the Google Maps, the Maps Compose package. So in the map compose, we have the modifier, the camera position. So it's rather like in my previous video I made of using the UI representative of Google Maps, but now there's a solid package that wraps in so that you don't now use the like here now all the life cycle of map when map created, map loaded, all those life cycles have been cut out for. So you just only render this compose function and passing these required parameters now to get. So when you check in here on the point of interest click, I'm calling the view model the get direction. I'm passing in origin as my default origins that I've ordered is in Singapore. This variable over here, this one, and also passing the destination at the current point that we clicked, the latitude and longitude, and also passed in the map key. The reason why I've placed the map key here is because you may be changing your map keys in the in the backend, not backend here in your server side. So maybe you'll be changing. So this one you can get this map key when the view model get initialized, so that it populates this one by default, so that when this point of interest is clicked, you just get the direction. So that's that, guys, and that's how this looks like over here. So launch again. So anytime you click any point of interest, it load data and of course emit our UI flow with the snap and loading direction loaded, all that. Right. So I also made some. If you click on any point in the map, we have markers over there. All right. So see you guys.